By now, many of you have probably heard of the MARSOC3, two Marine raiders and a corpsman who, after events on January 1st, 2020, let that sink in, 2020, were falsely accused of manslaughter, obstruction of justice, and negligent homicide. So what happened? In a nutshell, after being assaulted outside of a club and acting in defense of one of his fellow raiders, Gunnery Sergeant Josh Negron stepped in to defend his corpsman, punching the assailant once to end the fight. This is after the assailant hit the corpsman at least twice. After knocking the assailant unconscious and after the assailant's so-called friends just left him, the three took the contractor back to their berthing and monitored him throughout the night. When the contractor became unresponsive and stopped breathing, they immediately started emergency medical procedures until the contractor was able to be evacuated. However, the contractor later died in Germany. Despite the fact that this was self-defense, the Marine Corps, as well as their individual command, has hung these three Marines out to dry. Their command from day one has refused to look into their side, has constantly taken steps to ostracize the Marines and sailors, and has delayed their trial by court-martial for over 3 years now. Think about that. Denied justice for over 3 years. You might think, well, this is an isolated incident. It's not really, because the mentality started while General Amos was a commandant of the Marine Corps. I can very clearly remember as a personal anecdote with General Amos and kind of how this all came about. As a staff NCO, I was recently assigned to 3-2, and we had a conference at the base theater in Camp Lejeune, where then at the time Commandant General Amos, in front of the entire division, singled out all the staff NCOs and officers from 3-2 in attendance and berated us publicly for the incident that happened in Afghanistan with the sniper team. The ironic part, I wasn't even attached to 3-2 when that happened. But I was still told that essentially I was what was wrong with the Marine Corps, and by association, pardon my French, I was also a piece of shit. That's that kind of mentality. That's the mentality that's continued on throughout this ordeal, with the judge advocate speaking out in a threatening manner against a Marine Corps officer who was assigned to the defense of the corpsman. When a Marine captain is told by his superior, who is a full colonel, "I know who you are and what cases you are on, and you are not protected," and that's a direct quote. That's not just an idle threat. That's not just a piece of conversation. That's not a joke. That is a vindictive statement made by someone solely interested in furthering his own career and knowing that he has the protection of his chain of command because they fully support the goat rope that is his legal case against the MARSOC3. Now, before I continue on, let me apologize in advance to the other two because I've never met them. I can only speak specifically to Josh Negron. Let me be clear, though, before I continue also, we're not best of friends. We haven't stayed in touch over the years since we met. I met him, it was a few years back in 2003, while we were deployed with 13th Marine Expeditionary Unit. At the time, we were both corporals. He was part of the BLT with LAR. I was part of the MSSG, which was the support element. But we both happened to be on the same ship, the USS Germantown. I can always remember walking up and down the hallways. Anytime I ran into Josh, he was legitimately one of the nicest guys I've ever met. Never once did I ever catch him in a bad mood. Always greeted with a smile, always super happy to see you, super laid back. Hell, he didn't even have a conversation with a random pope like myself. Ran into him a few years later in Iraq with another mutual friend of ours who had gone to Force Recon with him at the time. This is before he went to MARSOC. This is actually before MARSOC had even been reinvented, if you will. But this time, it was a little different. This is the only time I ever saw him in a foul mood. I saw him and our other friend in the chow hall walk walked up, said hi. He kind of looked at me, grunted, and just ignored me. I was a little confused. But that was the end of my interaction with him. Why? Well, as I was talking with our mutual friend, he informed me that while they were on patrol earlier that day, Josh had gotten shot. I believe it was in his front and his back plates. Alright, fair enough. I'd be a little bit out of shape too. All that being said though, with the time I've spent in the Marine Corps, I've seen enough to know when someone's being hung out to dry in order to further a point or a political career. And right now, the MARSOC3 are being hung out to dry with zero accountability above them. Similar to that day in Iraq, they're getting shot in their back plate, but this time it's not an enemy sniper, it's their own chain of command that has done it and is continuing to do it. This needs to stop. Those in charge of this goat rope need to be held accountable to the truth, as well as forced to stop the charade. If you don't know what to do, reach out to your congressman, congresswoman, your senators, anyone that you have contact with, and remind them that this is going on and it needs to end. Spread the message. The Marine Corps needs to be held accountable for this. This cannot continue.